I've just spent this morning working on my he shed, on my man cave, on my radio shack, on my shed, the shed at the bottom of my garden, which I've just made into my clubhouse. Yes, it's pretty cool in here, to be fair. I've got a desk, I've got a spinny chair, I put power in here, I've got my radios. So we're talking about going back to the 1980s, a time when there was no internet. Imagine that. A time when we used to get our news through newspapers, or if our parents were a bit posh, maybe CFAX. A time where the latest technology was the Sony cassette Walkman, and the closest you got to an electric car was a Sinclair. Mobile phones, the thing I'm using to record this on now, didn't exist. Most households, like mine, had one phone. So when CB radios came along, they were an absolute game changer. An absolute game changer, because try and think back to a time when you couldn't just contact people. You want to get hold of a friend, you couldn't just pick up a phone. So that means you wouldn't know where they were, you wouldn't know how to get hold of them, and CB radios changed all of that. It literally meant if you wanted to go for a ride on your BMX bike, or you wanted to arrange a game of football, all of a sudden you could just pick up a mic and you could chat to your friends. Keith, Ben, are you around? Do you fancy a game of football? And they come back to you. It was amazing. It was like magic. But CB also had its own, it was almost like the original social media, because as well as being able to speak to many of your friends, you would also speak to people that you didn't know. You'd make contacts that you didn't know. And some of those people were complete bellends, and CB radio certainly had, and still does, have more than its fair share of those people. But equally, some of those people weren't. And you go on, you'd arrange an eyeball, which would mean to, an eyeball in CB radio was when you'd be chatting to somebody on the CB radio, and at some point you'd say, yeah, actually, do you know what, we get on quite well, let's meet up. That was called an eyeball. So, I mean, I'm thinking of my original group of friends, and CB radio was a really big part of that. But we had people coming into our group, people that we started chatting to on the CB radio that we then arranged to meet on our BMX bikes. And the next thing you know, you're having a game of football with these people. So we met a lot of people back in the day through CB radio. So you've got channel 14, which was your old calling channel. So what a calling channel is, for example, now that CB radio is on channel 19. Just notice it's on channel 19 but on the wrong band, so hang on. Just going to put this back on the right calling band. There. So back in the day, it was channel 14 was your calling channel. So what you'd do is you'd have your CB radio on all the time, and if someone wanted to speak to you, they'd come through to 14 and they'd say, for example, my handle. So you wouldn't use your real name in CB radio, you'd make up a name which would be your handle. My handle was the hot dog back in the day. So I'd sit on 14 and a friend of mine would call through and say, hot dog, are you out there? You'd pick up your mic and you'd say, hello mate, yeah, I'm here, shall we move to channel 21, for example. So you'd find an empty channel of the 40 channels that were available, and you'd move off of 14, hence leaving it clear for anybody else that wanted to kind of call up anyone else on that channel. Channel 19 was the truckers channel. So the truckers used to call each other on 19 and also give each other road traffic information and updates, because again, back in that day, no sat nav, no mobile phones. CB radio was probably the best way of getting local traffic information. So 19 was the truckers channel. Nowadays, in 2025, 19 seems to have become the calling channel. So I don't really know anyone that sits on 14 waiting for a call. Everybody now seems to use channel 19 to make contact. So yeah, CB was an absolute game changer. The range of it used to be quite limited, the old 4-watt radios. So I grew up in a place called Findon in West Sussex, and I remember I could get from Findon to Durrington, but I couldn't get from Findon to Goring. So in order for me to get a hold of my friend that used to live in Goring, I would have to relay a message from my friend in Durrington. He would then take that message, relay it on to my friend in Goring, who would then reply back to him. He'd relay the reply back to me. It was really good fun. Another thing we used to do as well is we used to play board games over the CB radio because there was no computers. There was no Xboxes. We had a Spectrum and a Commodore C64. Used to put tapes in them to load up a game, but you know they weren't like they are now. So we used to play board games using the CB radio. So we used to play a lot of drafts. So you know, I'd have a board set up, my friend would have a board set up, and he'd let you know the piece that he's moved via the CB radio. You'd tell him the piece that you're moving, and you both have these draft sets set up. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. In many ways, CB radio was also like the first dating site or the first dating app, because a lot of the time you used to meet girls via the CB radio. Now, there weren't that many women on CB radio, so I think those that were there tended to probably get quite a lot of attention. But yeah, you can have an eyeball on the CB radio and essentially set up a date via CB. And I did do that once. I won't say the handle of this lady in case she's still around, but there was someone in the 90s that used to have an amazing sounding voice, a very sexy sounding voice. And I managed to arrange for an eyeball with this girl. So I jumped on my BMX bike and I took with me, got one here somewhere I think, where's that gone? One of these, well not exactly like this, but a handheld CB radio, which I used to take around on my bike with me. Again, the original mobile phone. And yeah, I was cycling along my BMX bike, meeting this girl outside Tesco's in Durrington, and I saw this, I mean, how can I be polite, not very attractive person at all. Kind of looked like something out of the Hills Have Eyes movie. And I thought, that can't be her. Surely that can't be her. And in her hand, I saw one of these. And I thought, ah. So I pedalled off as quickly as I possibly could. I got out of there. CB radios, as I got a bit older, I had a Peugeot 309 was my first car. And again, that had a CB radio mounted in it. And quite a few of my friends had CB radios as well. So not only did they allow you to, you know, kind of communicate to people within your house, you could also do it from your car, from car to car. And we used to play a game as well called Chase the Fox. And I used to love doing this. And Chase the Fox would basically be where you would have hunters. So everyone would have a CB radio. So if you had 8, 10, 6 mates had CB radios in their car, one of you would be the fox. So you'd run in your car, you'd drive off in your car, and what you had to do when you were the fox is you had to key up. So you'd key up and you'd have to talk. You have to key up every sort of 3 to 4 minutes. Then what the hunters would do is they would be looking at your transmit power, so they could tell if they were getting closer or further away from you, hotter or colder, based on how strong your signal was. So what you get happening is, sure enough, the hunters would sort of start to move around and get closer and closer to the fox. So you'd take a road off to the left, and you know, you'd try and avoid the hunters in your car. It was a great fun game. Basically, you were caught when somebody said, "I've seen you in such and such a road." At that point, you'd be caught. It's kind of like tag, but with a CB radio. So we fast forward to 2025, and I hadn't had a CB radio for probably about 20, 25 years, something like that. But I started using the PMR radios at the metal detecting rallies because they're really handy when you're out in the field, and a lot of the time mobile phones have no signal. So we started using the PMR rallies, and there's a chap there called Lee who he's an amateur radio operator, and that got me really curious, and I thought, I don't know if I can be bothered to get my amateur license, but I wonder if anyone still uses CB radio. So I went on Facebook Marketplace, bought myself a little CB radio, keyed up, and sure enough, somebody answered. That was over in Hastings. Couldn't believe it. The next journey, I went from Eastbourne down to Worthing, Durrington, again keyed up. People came back to me. There was still people on CB radio after all. From there, it wasn't long until I found myself spending a bit more money on the CRT SS 9900 amateur radio, but converted to be able to transmit on 27 megahertz. And it does AM, it does upper sideband, it does lower sideband. We'll go into them on a different video. Is there still people on CB radio in 2025? Absolutely. Is there as many people as there was? Definitely not. Is there idiots on CB radio? Absolutely. In 2025? Absolutely. Is there as many idiots? Absolutely not. So in a lot of ways, the fact that there's not so many people on CB radio, the fact that, you know, those 40 channels are not absolutely rammed full of people talking and people talking all over each other, in some ways it's made the hobby better. In addition, now with the more powerful radios, you can get a lot further with your CB radio, and it's cheap. It's a surprisingly cheap hobby to get into. As I say, I've got the setup in the shed. I've got one of these for in the shed. Well, actually, at the moment, I've only got one because I've lent one out to another local CB radio user. But usually speaking, I have one of the CRT SS 9900s in the shed. I have another one in my car. In the car, I've got a Thunderpole Orbiter antenna on a mag mount, which I think was about £50. And on the shed, I've got a silver rod. I would have liked to have had that on the house, but I was told by my wife that that's not allowed. I couldn't get planning permission from the missus to do that. So I've got the silver rod on my shed. And that silver rod I paid £20 for, second hand, on Facebook Marketplace. And I think about £10 for the coaxial cable. The radios, they both cost me £100 a pop. So I've got two setups. The car setup cost me about £150 and the shed setup cost me about £120. So not an expensive hobby in the grand scheme of things to get into at all, is it? Not at all. And I would absolutely, thoroughly recommend, particularly if you used to be a CB radioer, get yourself a CB radio. Have a look on Facebook Marketplace. Google the CRT SS 9900 or the CRT SS 6900 and get yourself back on the airwaves. CB radio is great fun.